The Gilded Age is an American historical drama television series created and written by Julian Fellowes for HBO that is set in the United States during the Gilded Age, the boom years of the 1880s in New York City. Originally announced in 2018 for NBC, it was later announced in May 2019 that the show was moved to HBO. The series premiered on January 24, 2022. In February 2022, the series was renewed for a second season. It has received mostly positive reviews, with particular praise for the costumes, cast, and performances of lead actors Carrie Coon, Morgan Spector and Christine Baranski. Premise: a young woman entering 1882 New York City's rigid social scene is drawn into the daily conflicts surrounding the nouveau riche Russell family and the established Van Rijnbroek family, as well as those faced by the upper and upper middle classes, the black upper class, and the domestic workers that tend to all of their needs. Cast and characters. Main. Carrie Coon as Bertha Russell, determined to use her money and position to break into a polite society that resists change at every turn. Morgan Spector as George Russell, Bertha's husband, and a classic robber baron representing new money. Louisa Jacobson as Marion Brooke, penniless young gentlewoman whose circumstances force her to live with her estranged aunts. Denise Benton as Peggy Scott, a young ambitious African-American writer who works as Agnes' secretary. Taissa Farmiga as Gladys Russell, innocent and naive, yet ready to be treated as an adult. Harry Richardson as Larry Russell, a recent Harvard University graduate eager to make his way in the world. Blake Ritson as Oscar Van Rijnen, Agnes' intelligent and charismatic son who is looking for a rich heiress to guarantee him a proper standard of living and act as a shield for his homosexuality. Thomas Cockerell as Tom Raikes, a sensible young lawyer, smitten when he meets Marion, his late client's orphaned daughter. Simon Jones as Mr. Bannister, the Van Rijnen self-aggrandizing English butler who keeps the rest of the staff in check. Jack Gilpin as Mr. Church, the Russell family's butler, evading his past by excelling at his job. Christine Baranski as Agnes Van Rijnen, a proud and stubborn old money socialite, head of the Brooke house. Cynthia Nixon as Ada Brooke, Agnes' sister who is reliant upon her charity. Kelly O'Hara as Aurora Fane, Agnes' niece by marriage who helps Marion break into society. Donna Murphy as Caroline Schermerhorn Astor, a prominent American socialite and leader of the elite group of New York society known as the 400. Deborah Monk as Mrs. Armstrong, Mrs. Van Rijnen's lady's maid. Christine Nielsen as Mrs. Bauer, cook for Mrs. Van Rijnen, taking young Bridget under her wing. Taylor Richardson as Bridget, the Van Rijnen housemaid, troubled by an abusive past. Ben Ehlers as John Jack Treacher, footman of the Van Rijnen household. Kelly Curran as Miss Turner, Bertha's ambitious lady's maid, who does not intend to be a servant all her days. She is fired at the end of Season 1. Douglas Sills as Monsieur Baudin, the chef of the Russell household who initially presents himself as French before it is revealed that he is Josh Borden from Wichita, Kansas. Celia Keenan Bolger as Mrs. Bruce, the Russells' new housekeeper. Michael Cerveris as Mr. Watson, George Russell's valet. Aaron Wilhelmi as Adelheid, Gladys Russell's lady's maid. Patrick Page as Richard Clay, George Russell's loyal secretary. Sullivan Jones as T. Thomas Fortune, publisher of the weekly New York Globe. Recurring. Audra McDonald as Dorothy Scott, Peggy's mother. Jean Triplehorn as Sylvia Chamberlain, a socialite excluded from high society due to past actions. Ashley Atkinson as Mamie Fish, American socialite and self-styled funmaker. Clayburn Elder as John Adams, Oscar's secret lover. Katie Finneran as Anne Morris, determined to keep new money out of her circle. Amy Forsyth as Carrie Astor, the comely daughter of Mrs. Astor. John Sanders as Stanford White, an up-and-coming American architect. John Douglas Thompson as Arthur Scott, Peggy's father. Linda Emmond as Clara Barton. Ward Horton as Charles Fane, Aurora's husband and one of the city's aldermen. Zuzana Sadkowski as Mabel Ainsley. Nathan Lane as Ward McAllister, arbiter of social rules and style in Old New York. Guest. Bill Irwin as Cornelius Eckhard. Michelle Gill as Patrick Morris, Anne's husband and one of the city's aldermen. Tom Blythe as Archie Baldwin. Andrew Child as Doylestown farmer. Episodes. Production. Development. In September 2012, the Daily Telegraph reported Julian Fellowes as saying that he was working on a spin-off prequel of Downton Abbey. Initially conceived as a book, it was then planned for pickup by ITV. At the time, Fellowes planned to focus the show around Lord Grantham and Cora's romance and eventual marriage as the Earl and Countess of Grantham. Production and writing for The Gilded Age was updated in January 2016. Asked whether he'd written the script yet, Fellowes said, "No, I haven't, no. I'm doing that this year," before adding, "and then hopefully shooting at the end of the year." On June 4, 2016, Fellowes was asked by the Los Angeles Times, "Where does The Gilded Age stand?" Fellowes replied, "It stands really with me up to my neck in research, and I'm clearing the decks, so that when I start Gilded Age, I'm only doing Gilded Age." These people were extraordinary. You can see why they frightened the old guard, because they saw no boundaries. They wanted to build a palace, they built a palace. They wanted to buy a yacht, they bought a yacht. And the old guard in New York weren't like that at all, and suddenly this whirlwind of couture descended on their heads. They redesigned being rich. They created a rich culture that we still have. People who are rich in a way that was established in America in the 1880s, 90s, 1900s. It was different from Europe. Something like Newport would never have happened in any other country, where you have huge palaces, and then about 20 yards away, another huge palace, and 20 yards beyond that another huge palace. In England right up to the 1930s, when people made good money, they would buy an estate of 5,000 acres and they'd have to look after nanny. The Americans of the 1880s and 90s didn't want too much of that. The final confirmation the show would be produced was announced by NBC in January 2018. NBC originally announced that the show would consist of 10 episodes and premiere in 2019. About the show, Fellowes stated, "To write The Gilded Age is the fulfillment of a personal dream. I have been fascinated by this period of American history for many years and now NBC has given me the chance to bring it to a modern audience. I could not be more excited and thrilled. The truth is, America is a wonderful country with a rich and varied history, and nothing could give me more pleasure than be the person to bring that compelling history to the screen." In May 2019, the series moved from NBC to HBO, with a straight-to-series order. The series premiered on January 24, 2022, and consists of 9 episodes. On February 14, 2022, HBO renewed the series for a second season. Casting. In September 2019, the production announced an initial cast consisting of Christine Baranski, Cynthia Nixon, Amanda Peet, and Morgan Spector. In November 2019, it was announced that Denise Benton, Louisa Jacobson, Taissa Farmiga, Blake Ritson, and Simon Jones would be joining the show. In January 2020, Harry Richardson, Thomas Cockerell, and Jack Gilpin were cast as series regulars, with Jean Triplehorn cast in a recurring role. In April, Carrie Coon was cast as Bertha Russell to replace Pete because of delays caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. This caused the costuming team to change their approach, using the way Kuhn presents herself as inspiration for more metallic-colored dresses intended to evoke the burgeoning machine age. In January 2021, Nathan Lane joined the cast in a recurring role. In April 2022, it was announced several members of the recurring cast had been upgraded to series regular status for the second season, while Cockerell will exit the series. Filming. Following the move to HBO, the series was expected to begin filming in March 2020, before the COVID-19 pandemic delayed production. Filming of the series began in Newport, Rhode Island in February 2021, at the mansions Chateau-sur-Mer, The Elms, and The Breakers. A casting call for Rhode Islanders to work as extras on the series was made in December 2020 prior to the production setting up in the city. In April 2021, filming continued at Lyndhurst Mansion in Tarrytown, New York, and the Hudson River Museum in Yonkers, New York. In May 2021, filming continued in Troy, New York, in its central Troy Historic District, where multiple city blocks were transformed to resemble a Victorian-era street. During filming, a horse died on set and people for the ethical treatment of animals asked for an investigation. HBO subsequently issued a statement confirming the death in late June, saying, "A horse collapsed and died, likely of natural causes, according to a veterinarian's preliminary findings." Filming for Season 2 began in August 2022. Filming for Season 2 has taken place at various locations around White Plains, New York, including Manhattanville College's Reed Hall. Reed Hall has been used as various sets including offices, a home parlor and an art gallery/museum. Reed Hall was designed by Stanford White and built in 1892 for the family of newspaper publisher and diplomat, White Law Reed. Reed Castle was added to the National Registry of Historic Places in 1972. Controversy. On May 21, 2021, the American Federation of Musicians of the United States and Canada filed a charge for unfair labor practices against HBO and its Gilded Age production. The union claimed musicians were fired after asking they be represented by AFM. 2 days later, HBO agreed to cover the members on an AFM basis. Real-life events. Although The Gilded Age is a work of fiction, Julian Fellowes worked to accurately represent certain realities of the time period. Caroline Schermerhorn Astor, also known as the Mrs. Astor, ruled New York society in the late 19th century. Descending from Dutch settlers, the Knickerbocker married relatively new money William Backhouse Astor Jr. At the time the series takes place, Astor and her husband are largely estranged. Dismayed by the chaos caused by the end of the Civil War and the rise of new money, and armed with her own distinguished lineage and her husband's fortune, she became the gatekeeper to high society. She and her associate Ward McAllister decreed that members of respectable society must be separated by at least 3 generations from the origin of the family fortune, as she herself was. McAllister, M.R.S. Astor's right-hand man, spent years across the Atlantic absorbing culture, details of European courts, and society news. Although some recognized his devotion to preserving elegance and tradition, others saw him as an unapologetic snob. 2 characters, Bertha and George Russell, appear to be at least partly based on the formidable Alva and William K. Vanderbilt. Alva Esrakine Vanderbilt came from a wealthy Mobile, Alabama family that lost its money after the Civil War. Determined to regain her social status, she married a scion of the immensely wealthy Vanderbilt family in 1875. But the Vanderbilts were considered too new money by Caroline Astor and were largely ignored. Determined to ascend to the upper echelons of society, Alva Vanderbilt set out to impress Caroline Astor. Among her strategies, she hired society architect Richard Morris Hunt to build a luxurious mansion on Fifth Avenue, then hosted an enormous, extravagant ball for 1,000 as a housewarming. All details of the festivities were leaked in advance to the press, and young society waited breathlessly for the upcoming ball, including Caroline Astor's daughter, Carrie. Caroline Astor was forced to call on Alva Vanderbilt to ensure her daughter received an invitation. The ball a success, the family was officially welcomed into New York high society. If Bertha Russell is modeled on Alva Vanderbilt, her husband, George Russell, bears little similarity to his counterpart, William K. Vanderbilt. He seems to be inspired by Vanderbilt only on the basis of wealth and marriage to an Alva-like wife. Other historical figures who appear in the series include Clara Barton, founder of the American Red Cross, and T. Thomas Fortune, a man born into slavery who would become one of the leading black journalists of his day. In his editorials, he wrote passionately about civil rights and denounced racial segregation and discrimination. He also helped found a predecessor to the NAACP, the Afro-American League. Reception. Critical response. At review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, the series holds a certified fresh 80% approval rating based on 70 reviews, with an average rating of 7.0/10. The site's critical consensus reads, Julian Fellowes' brand of upstairs, downstairs intrigue makes a seamless transatlantic transition in the Gilded Age, with an outstanding cast making the travails of the rich a compelling watch. At Metacritic, the series has a score of 68 out of 100, based on 38 reviews, indicating generally favorable reviews.